Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Magic Pause podcast. It's your host, Annalena, and I'm extremely delighted that I have an amazing guest with me here today. His name is Robert James Comber, and we connected, I think, about a month ago while I was having the True Sidereal Summit. So I think you watched a couple of the interviews. You, I guess, caught my attention and stuff, and you reached out and you told me about your beautiful project, about the Lost Octave, and I didn't know much about it. So we connected, we had a little conversation, and it was like, let's have you on the podcast, of course. And I'm just gonna read a little bit about you that you shared with me, and then I'm gonna give it all to you, okay? All right, so Robert James Comber is a cosmic architect of the mystical, international best-selling author of his first book, The Lost Octave, that explores his latest new discoveries in the ancient I Ching and astrology. And upon the Lion's Gate, August 8 in 23, Robert received the Lost Octave transmission through the new Venus cycle alignment to Leo as a hyperdimensional way, a view of how music, ancient scriptures, and sacred geometry align with astrology to guide the way into the new Aquarian age. It was Ra Uruhu's Rave Mandala that Robert was called to look at, where he began to see the lost gates as his remembrance from the ancient oral traditions of Lao Tzu came back into clarity. Wow, I'm really curious. Welcome, first of all, Robert. I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So great to be here and open up this conversation, and and great work. Thank you for putting on that beautiful summit as well. It was so great to see different viewpoints, right? And
Yeah.
that's the whole basis of my work is we take the same sort of basic fundamentals of this technology, and then how is these things being either updated or remembered or moved into new ways, new alignments for us to dive into.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this so much because that's really one of my biggest values or gifts. Like, I like to see from different perspectives. And I think we live in a society where we want to have safety and security, right? And we hold on to certain processes or systems and also personality tests and things like this, right? But we often let it define us and box us in some way. And I have just experienced also from my contemplation with human design and gene keys, like we get to be anything we want, right? And ultimately, I have a lot of Virgo in my chart, so I love to refine and analyze things and make it better and find words one penny off and stuff like that. I love math. And so I love everything that is just working on improving what we already have in the context of nature, like aligning it more with nature. And right, we already had this conversation that the true sidereal conversation is all about looking actually into the sky, what is really there, because tropical astrology is not really that. It's a bit shifted, but tropical is also very relevant and it's a foundation for almost all of us. Just like you received your downloads through the Lionsgate portal, right? And so it's all, I think that's more based on tropical. And now it's leading us into these totally new things that I think none of us was looking for. I don't think you were planning to have the transmission you had. I wasn't planning to shift into true sidereal because, with human design, it changes your chart, it changes your gene keys profile and everything. So here we are, and I would love to hear how did it all happen for you? What is a little bit of your background, where you're coming from, and tell us about eventually the book that came about from this.
Yeah, no, so beautiful. And yeah, absolutely similar to you. Like I was not expecting this at all. I was actually for the last sort of 7 years, I had sort of my awakening, you could say, and then I went into all different types of sort of healing modalities. That was my first sort of draw into all of this, and that really into the chakra system, and not just sort of what we know in the West, but really researching the Vedic tantric systems and finding loads of secret sort of chakras and activations and the ancient ways. So through the 7 years, I was doing all of this on myself and going deep into esoteric wisdom. And then I was sort of taking people, guiding people through these different activations. So I created my own sort of modality because I couldn't find the one modality that felt right. So when I trained in, I mean, I think I trained in, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe even 40 different modalities of healing. And of course, they all like connected certain things, but there wasn't this one system that I felt was my heart. So I used all of that knowledge to create my own system. So that's really where I came from. And then, sort of 2 years before the book, I had this idea of creating a system that was like an astrology, but was through color. So I'm
Mm.
a horologist, so that's my sort of background is art and color and understanding how color influences our daily decisions and our lives. And so I was creating this sort of astrological color system that's really very, very Aquarian. And so I was developing that, and then it was on the Lionsgate that I just had this, I'd heard of human design a bit, and I'd sort of seen a bit, but I hadn't really gone into it, or either the I Ching either. I
Mm.
sort of knew parts, but and so this Lionsgate, I was just called to bring up specifically the Rave Mandala, Ra's work. It was just so in me to be like, let's just have a look at this. I don't know why. Maybe there's something here for me, something.
Mhm.
And within 10 minutes, I was starting to see, like, sort of almost as if it was coming off the page, that there was some kind of mathematical geometry and that was there. And so I was just in that space of feeling, for me, I kind of feel this pressure, that there's this sort of like as if a rain cloud of golden rain is about to fall on me.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, and then I just pull the golden thread and it just floods. And so for that day, for about 24 hours that day, I was just in this mode. Nothing else. I don't even know what happened that day. Lionsgate just happened. And that's where I was doing all these mathematics and the geometries to figure out this pattern. And then it came to me through that I could see that there was a what I came to call the lost octave, that there was an octave that was there within the I Ching that hasn't been expressed. So
Mm.
of course, when this is sort of thing is happening, like there's so many doubts that you can go through of like, this is just crazy. Maybe like, this is an ancient manuscript, and what makes you think that you can find anything or add anything? And this book's been around for thousands of years. But it was this sense of, no, just keep going through this. And so I actually started to work out which gates and what the numbers were and where they were. And the funny thing was, gate 65 was actually on the same day of the Lion's Gate. So the
Mm.
first of the higher octave was the actual day I was in. And so these like synchronicities kept happening. And to be honest with you, the Lost Octave in a way came about because after I received that information, I tried to find all of the different ways to try and disprove what I just found.
Oh,
Right. And that,
that's good. I mean, that's what we do, right?
yeah.
Hypothesis testing. Yeah.
So that's, it's like the scientific way, right? You
Yeah.
fight, you discover something, and then so I went into, the I Ching, I went into quantum physics, I went into music, I went into ancient languages, and everywhere I turned, it was just reinforcing it over and over and over again. And so this idea of moving it into 72 was initially very spontaneous and auspicious because 72, I knew from my uh, research, was connected to the ancient Hebrew divine names of God. So the highest teaching in the Hebrew mysteries are called the 72 names of God.
Mm.
And so then it moves into geometry where 72 or 720 is a tetrahedron. And then you start looking into the mathematics of all of that, and then it just grows and grows and grows. And so this is really the Lost Octave is like a presentation of like, this is what I found. These are the areas I looked in to try and see if it was a correct thing.
Mm.
And then as I was writing the book, I was starting to have these remembrances of Confucius and Lao Tzu and things like that. And so Confucius had 72 disciples. And
Mm.
this number 72 is everywhere. Christ had 72 disciples. This number 72 is just littered throughout our history, and it's in every ancient civilization, and it concords to the geometry, to time, to mathematics, to astrology. And of course, we process through the equinox 72, 1 degree every 72 years. So there's this whole.
Hold on. Now, can I interrupt you? Because yeah, so in because with true sidereal astrology, I feel like we're on you. I mean, you're definitely onto something, but we're all together changing things because so every 72 years there's a 1 degree shift of the spring equinox, like where the sun is. So that this is why, we have this difference between the sidereal, true sidereal, and the oh my gosh, okay, this is cool. Go on.
Yes, so exactly. These things were just dropping in about this 72. And so when you look at the like the divine name of God, it adds to the number 72 in
So
Hebrew language.
can I share something? Because this is so yesterday, because we had a conversation in my membership yesterday about the age of Aquarius, which also, according to tropical, we're there, but according to true sidereal, we're not there for a while, but we have Aquarian energy through being in the 11th house, but we're still in Pisces. But either way, so there was also kind of this like, there's all these differences and it depends how we look at it. And I think I was brushing my teeth last night, and all of a sudden I was like, my mind started to think, what if we just have to shift time so that it is exactly a year, and then we don't have this 1% and the 72-year kind of thing anymore? And I started to my head was like, oh, but why is this coming to me? Because I really feel like because the whole conversation, the membership was like, well, how we calculate time is kind of wrong. And at some point, Julius Caesar decided that, we have these 12 months, and really October is the 10th month. No, it's the 8 months, and it should start in spring, really, in March. And then I also learned, again, I wasn't looking for it, but if you divide the days of a year by 28, we would actually have 13 months. And that would also then really align with the lunar cycle, right? And I think there was still like, when you divided this, you still had, I think, a quarter of a day left or something. There was like 28 point something after the dot. And because we also have a leap year. So anyways, but I felt like there's something, if we just align time right, we will have the same point every year, but we have to change the calendar. So I don't know. I just wanted to share because now that you're saying this is like, yeah, there must be something.
Yeah, well, that's exactly how the Lost Octave, what I share in the book, is. So what I did was that because 64, although it's connected to the cube, it's
Mm-hmm.
not really connected to time. So in the ancient Sumerians, they would connect what they call base 60. So there was always this 60 and 12 formation. That was sort of the alignment of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did was to find the lost octave was I plotted the first 60 hexagrams around the wheel rather than 64. Well, of course,
Okay.
that left four left. And so I put the four in the four directions in the center. And I was like, okay, so now we have 60 in the four directions. Okay, that seems mathematically okay. But of course, there's 12 signs. So it's one of the first drawings in the book is the actual drawing that I did. And so when you put 12 spokes from the center outwards, it leaves you with 8 areas that are free, that are gaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was the revelation that 72 pulls it into the idea of time, because 60 and the 12 is connected to time and 72 is connected into that framework. And so then it moves, like the geometry of 64 moves it into the relationship of time. And then it goes deeper than that, because I found that the octave actually wasn't just an octave, but a hypercube, which is a fourth dimensional Venus star. And so that's why I say it's a Venus transmission.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because a regular cube is this the 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 dimension? Because
Yeah. So
the
yeah, exactly.
64, right? So we have a 3D cube.
Yeah, so the four
And
times four times four, yeah,
yeah,
64. And
yeah,
then so on the cover of the book that you've got there,
yeah.
that that star that's
Device.
on the cover, that's that is the hypercube.
Oh
So
wow.
it's the eight pointed Venus star.
Mm.
And it's actually, when I was doing it, I was like, oh my God, this is a fourth dimensional hypercube. Now, all of a sudden, we're looking at astrology through the fourth dimension, which is time.
Mm. You know what's really interesting? Because so Ethan Chimenti, he is the true sidereal astrologer, and actually in the interview I had with him on the summit, you may have listened to it. He was talking about it like, yeah, probably because this is not the end of it, right? Like, yeah, we have now developed the true sidereal astrology, but he was already talking like next thing is probably 4D, and you're already kind of working on it, right? And we talked, and I think I connected you with Ethan. I said, reach out to him because I think you guys need to talk. So, mm, that is really
Yes.
cool.
So you could say, in a way, that the gates between 65 and 72, so the higher octave,
Yeah.
though it connects to the third dimensional plane, actually they sit in the fourth dimensional plane and above. And so this is where this, and it's not necessarily like it's higher, like that it discredits the other ones. It's just that
Yeah.
it's in a different dimension. And so that's when I then expanded a normal octave of 8 notes into what they call a chromatic octave of all 12 notes. And
Hmm.
that was the gates from 61 to 72. So now all of a sudden it was connecting into music. So
Mm-hmm.
maths, geometry, time, and music.
Beautiful.
So then I started to dive deep into music, and I actually, in the book at the back, all of the gates are linked to musical notes, and they're all linked to frequencies.
Mm.
So there's a whole list at the back, and also in the back they're listed the 72 angels of each gates, and also the Latin as well. So I learned lots of Latin and Hebrew in this whole entire process
Mm.
doing this. So yeah, it's really fun. You can see all of the gates that you're connected with. You can see all of these beautiful things. So then I started to find some really interesting things like Stonehenge. Stonehenge is based on the same imprint as the Lost Octave, which is the 60 around the outside and 12 in the center. And
Really?
this,
Wow. I have been there many, many years ago. Mm.
yeah, so you start to see like these patterns that are reflecting out into, our stone circles and in the divine mathematics. And of course, it all, like I said, it goes back to the Babylonians, to the Sumerians. And so this is like the divine sacred geometry. And of course, it all links into the precession of the equinox, like the 25,960 years. Like
Hmm.
it's all divisible by these things.
Right. No, it is. Yes, yes. Because that's exactly, we were talking about it because we were talking about the Aquarian age and the precession of the equinox and these ages we have and how it's all divided. Yeah. So the 72 goes perfectly into that.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's other things as well that I found was at the time of writing the book, talk about like sort of kind of divine timing.
Hmm.
At the time of that, I got connected to Robert Edward Grant and his work with the pyramids. And so I connected through Shakespeare's work because I was finding Shakespeare's codes in the I Ching.
Mm.
Right. So
Wow.
this like yeah, so I connected to Alan Green, he connected me to Robert Grant, and then when I met Robert Grant, he was working on a lot of work within the King's Chamber in the pyramids. And
Hmm.
so as he was doing that, I was connecting all of the ancient star law of the Dendera stone into the I Ching. So that was part of the Lost Octave work, is to connect the ancient star law into the gates. And so when I was doing that, he was showing me the King's Chamber, and he was finding that there was drawings on the walls in the King's Chamber. And so when I looked at the drawings that he'd done, I knew that they were the deacons of astrology, because this is exactly what I'm writing at the same time. And so I said, well, can you have a look on this wall? Because there should be like a fish here and there should be this symbol here. And sure enough, we looked there and there was exactly, his drawing was exactly where the fish was. And so all of a sudden, now from two different angles, we've got the star law with the I Ching, the Lost Octave that I'm doing, in with his work of the King's Chamber, and all the mathematics is aligning. And so in the end, we ended up making sort of a first discovery where basically we've proposed that the King's Chamber is basically an astrological stargate. And so
Mm.
this was like an amazing thing that was happening as I was writing this process of the book. So it was just weird that it went from no, I wasn't intentionally to do this, to Lionsgate, to all of a sudden these things. And that's what was, in the end, I would say the most paramount part of the book is to bring back the ancient star law. And that's what I feel is missing when it comes to astrology, because we could say that we're, say, a Scorpio or Aries,
Mm.
but in the ancient days, they would break each individual sign into 3 decans of 10 degrees.
Mhm.
Now, what most people know about decans is they know them by their elemental signs. So they class them as the 3 fire signs, 3 water signs, 3 air
Mhm.
signs. But that's not really giving us anything of depth. What you need to go into is the real true stories. And so they're all different constellations in the stars. And so I mapped all of that into the I Ching hexagrams. And now all of a sudden, you could say your gate 60, for example, and now you can really know what is the true story of your life that's meant to unfold. What are the challenges? What are you meant to know and do? And so this is where it's bringing the true meaning into this. And when you go into the star stories, which that's why the book's so big,
Yeah.
is that the I found that there was every story that's ever been written is in the stars. Every biblical story, every nursery rhyme, every fairy tale that you've heard, it is all coming from the stars. And this is the beauty of the ancient mystics that wove the star stories into our personification of that there was a person walking the earth. That was this story, but that's nothing to do with the person. It's literally the movement in the heavens. So it's just,
Wow, this is so fascinating, you guys. Are you guys blown away? So just to, because this is very advanced here. I love it. I love it so much because I really feel like I'm expanding as I'm listening. And so in human design and in the gene keys and in the Chinese I Ching, we have 64 archetypes. We have 64 hexagrams, we have 64 gates, we have 64 gene keys. And so Robert's work now has been the discovery of there are 8 more, right? It's like now going to 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72. So there's 8 more. And yeah, it's just quite incredible. So now if I, maybe you can show us a slide where can you show us like how does it look like now? Because now all of a sudden, I guess the gate is a little bit thinner than what it was because now we have to have a little bit more in there, right? We have all of a sudden 72 instead of 64.
yeah, it's really interesting, especially the mathematics, because it turns the gates from the sort of six, like in a way, the 6 degrees into 5 degrees each. But then it
Mm.
kind of gets more complicated because I also found, which we'll go into, I found the addition of the seventh line. So
Well, now it gets interesting. Yes, yes.
changing essentially the it's essentially a hexagram into a seed of life, right? Because this is the sort of ancient story of the sort of creation story, is that there are 6 days of creation, but then the seventh day God rested. And the seventh, when you do sacred geometry, that seventh central point manifests by itself from the six. And the same with the chakra system. Once you
Mm.
reach the third
Ah.
eye, there is no way to activate the crown. The third eye gets activated, and then the seventh chakra actually blossoms by itself. It's not a thing that you can go into and go, I'm going to open my crown. It has to be an alignment of all the rest of the chakra system for the blossoming. So again,
Interesting.
these patterns are over and over again. So yeah, this is just one of the slides that I've done, but you can see here that there's some really interesting placements. So what I found was the 65, which was at the time, is at the bottom here in Leo,
Mm-hmm.
and it essentially is the same hexagram as the 7, but it's got a seventh line to it. And that's the seventh line takes it into that next development of the I Ching. And so when I was actually plotting that Venus star that's on the front cover of the book, you actually find that the cross of the Sphinx, I think you call it in human design, ended up being the four gates of the Lost Octave. So it goes to show that it was a very, very important alignment. This cross of the Sphinx ends up being in a higher octave, part of the Lost Octave.
So this is interesting because this is obviously in tropical, my incarnation cross, the Sphinx.
Oh, great.
So yeah, no coincidences here. So the 7, 13, the 2, and the 1 is in, that's the gates we have in the cross of the Sphinx. And now it would be then 65,
5,
66.
66, the 71, and the 72. And then what was really interesting about it was that they end up being the bookends of the octave, right? So you have the 65, 66, and then the 71 and 72, which is similar to the idea of the four bookends within the I Ching of the 1 and the 2, the 63 and the 64. So it's like a repeated pattern that ended up happening. And what was really beautiful, I feel, was that 71 ended up being the higher octave of gate 1, and 72 is the higher octave of gate 2. So even the numbers
Ah, that's
were,
true. Like you have the 1 again and the 2.
yeah. So, and what's beautiful is that it's the 72 ends up being in Taurus, whereas the before, the 71 is where the beginning is essentially of the gate 1, but actually in the higher octave we finish in its super partner in Taurus. And so this goes really deep in the star law, and this is what gives it the sort of concordance of orders. So in Scorpio, I write in the book about there's an octave of initiations in Scorpio. So again, when people think, oh, okay, my gate is gate 44, okay, that's fine. You look in the I Ching, that's fine. And then there's keynotes in the lines, and that's fine. But you're still missing the meaning of what the true constellation and the star law is. So this is what I've shared in the book, of that Scorpio goes through these 8 different transmutations, these death and rebirths, that
Mm.
starts off actually at the spider and then finishes in the phoenix. And then once it becomes the phoenix, that's not the end of the story. It doesn't just ascend and that's it. It actually then moves across to Taurus, and then it turns into the dove and descends into Taurus, into the body. So it's like we go through this journey of ascension, through the chakras, through the systems, through the energies. And then what's the end? Well, the end is then to create the divinity back into the body. So
I
it's
love
about
it. Yeah,
healing.
because Taurus is Earth. No, it's very grounded, physical,
Yeah,
physicality. Yeah.
yeah, you got the pure yin hexagram.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is that it's to be here in a physical body in harmony and bring heaven on earth, or as earth. And that's where the star law teaches you this story. So these are the sort of really beautiful things, and these calculations that happened, I'll show you in the book, that they weren't just me picking them out. They were actual a mathematical process. So it kind of was miraculous to me that it ended up being that they were this cross of the Sphinx. And then you got the other ones, that the 69 is right on the edge of Aries, which then is opposite the 70, which is in Libra. And so they work in these, the harmonic
Yeah.
superpowers.
Yeah. So now, of course, I have a question.
Mhm.
So I actually see you have the sign of efficacy in the middle.
Hmm.
For those of you guys that are listening on the audio podcast, hop over to YouTube. You're gonna see the video there. Um, so in true sidereal astrology, we go by 13 signs, plus the signs are not equal in size anymore, right? So for example, Pisces, I think, is about 42 degrees. Virgo, I think, is almost 50 degrees. Aries, I think, is only 21 degree or something like this. So we still have 360 degree, but we now have 13 signs and they're not equal in size. So what's the next step?
Yeah, so funnily enough, in my journey through, that was this idea of the 13 was again coming over and over again
Hmm.
in my work, and so I really went into that in depth. And of course, we know that they work in super partners, right? So every sign has its opposite sign.
Hmm.
And so when I went deeply into Orpheochus, it was interesting because what I revealed there is I actually found the true identity of what the serpent bearer is, and it's not a man, it's a woman.
Yeah, exactly. It's the divine feminine. Totally. Yeah, yeah. I agree. No, no, I have already had, yes.
But I found this through the name itself. So the name itself tells you who it actually is. So names are normally job titles, right? So it's normally the function is also the name. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so beautiful when you research your own name, you start to see like what is your own life purpose? What is your own sort of what are you designed for?
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of Orpheochus, well, what I did was in the name, if you take the S from Orpheochus at the end and you stick it on the front, which is an ancient way of a lot of encryptions that happen in ancient
Mm-hmm.
texts,
Mm-hmm.
you end up with Sophiuku,
Mm-hmm.
which is Sophia. And so then I researched, well, what does Yuku mean? And it means universe. So actually, the name Orpheochus actually is the universe of Sophia. That's the true
Wow.
identity of the 13th sign. So then I was thinking, well, okay, in the star law, what is the opposite to that? And so this is why you need the deacons. So Orpheochus didn't just come out of nowhere. It was a deacon in Scorpio. That's where its origins came from. But then it became elevated into the zodiac ecliptic because of where it crosses. And so then what was the opposite of that? Well, the opposite, which I then explored and called the 14th sign, the missing 1/14th, which is the ancient symbol of in Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, is Orion. And so
Mm-hmm.
then I was like, okay, but Orion we know that isn't on the ecliptic. So then, was that really the true sign? And then, of course, we know that star constellations like Cetus is such a huge constellation, and a lot of people propose that that was the 14th sign. But actually, I went into deeply into how to qualify a zodiac. Like, how do you actually qualify astronomically to qualify into being part of the zodiac? And so when I did this, I looked at Orion, and there's these parameters that you have to go by, these degrees that has to be within a certain amount of degrees. And it wasn't the whole of Orion, it was Orion's hand. And it was Orion's right hand. Well, the right hand of God is Christ consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only part of Orion that qualifies in the zodiac is the right hand of God. And so now Orion is in the constellation, it's his hand, but it's there, it's on that ecliptic parameter. And so then now we've got this Orpheochus sitting above and Orion underneath the ecliptic, but they both qualify. And that's what I feel is where now the 13th and the 14th are also part of this wheel. And of course, then, like you said, with the true sidereal, it's all carved up into different degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of that Orion maybe end up being sort of a fairly small portion because it's just the hand, but it's going to be there
Yeah,
that I
it's the
want.
same with Ophiuchus. we pronounce a little different. I think we know what we mean. So the it's a very small sign, and I think it's actually gate 1 or 43 or something. It's very small in the.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So this is where, like in the book, these were sort of discoveries that I made and put them forward as to say, well, this is what I did, this is what I found, and like, wow, we've got new different potentials of looking into these things. And there's Orion is special because we know that there are so many pyramids around the world that are aligned to Orion, and
Mhm.
the story of Orion and Orpheus is essentially us. And so again, it's another symbol of the humanity in the stars. The other ones we have like Virgo and we have Aquarius, but we're missing the Orpheus and Orion. And so it's our hero's journey or heroine's journey through the wheel, and that's why it's sort of not there, right? Because that's the deep secret mystery that we need to uncover. And so I feel like Orion really needs to be there because there are places around the world. Why are they dedicating it to one star system so importantly? And it's not even in our zodiac. It doesn't even make sense.
Mhm.
So this is my sort of call of revolution to say, yes, let's look at the true sky. Let's look at more constellations. Let's involve the deacons back because they are, but like I said, by saying you're a Capricorn, that gives you such a broad brush. If you
Yeah.
understand the three different deacons within Capricorn, you
Mhm.
can go right into that story. And some of these stories are where you get all of the Greek myths from. There are biblical references to those deacons. And so the entire sort of story of humanity, and that's why the book says it's our story in the stars, because everything that's up there is playing out through us incarnating on the earth. And so if we don't know those stories, then how can we navigate this world? And so the I Ching and just the zodiac sign itself is only going to give us so much. We need to really go into the actual meaning of all of this.
Yeah, so fascinating. Because I remember when we had a chat a few weeks ago, like I think you showed me mine, and it was like it's somewhere close to gate 38, and it was like a bird, some kind of a bird that has like this high level view of everything, and I
Yeah,
could
Aquila.
I could very much connect to it because I think this is what this entire conversation here is about, right? To having like a high level overview and you know, just seeing it from all these different perspectives and being open-minded and like it can be this and this. And it's up to everyone what feels true to them. I can tell you just listening to you and also seeing my path with human design, gene keys, and true sidereal, and now this coming, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, let's keep refining. It just feels very, very aligned, very true because so many coincidences, right? And you really try to proved it wrong and that failed. It's like, okay, there is something there, you know?
Yeah, and the Dendera stone, and all of the ancient Babylonian astrology is all star law. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really our original science. It's our, it's the
Mm-hmm.
true science of the stars. And so this is why I say that normal astrology in that way doesn't get into the depth. And so this is the website, for example, that you can go down and you can look at the deacons and you can start to see.
Mm-hmm.
So with yours,
Ah.
so you've got Capricorn, so
Mm-hmm.
we can go into that. And in here, I actually developed my own what I call quadrinity psychology, which actually takes you through the process of how to embody the light of Capricorn or gate 61.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where you can start to see like what is its highest light. It's about the cave, and that's where the hexagram 61, which I will go into as I found was pretty special. It's about going into the cave, which is the cave of Brahma in the ancient Vedic system, to find the inner light, right? So that's the overlighting premise of Capricorn in the darkness, is to find the inner light. to find the fountain of youthfulness. What is the transformation of obscuration of all of the things that are veiling you, to embody the cornucopia. And that's a word that's connected to the journey of uh, the goat moving up the mountain into the arms of the good shepherd, which is Taurus. So
Mm.
this is how you start to see, like, it, the story unfolds your journey. And so when you were speaking about your deacon, so these are all done in degrees. So the 0 to 10 degrees is Sagitta, the 10 to 20 is Aquila, and the 20 to 30 degrees is Delphinus. So your one is Aquila, the eagle. And so it's kind of linked to Sagitta here, because in the claws or the talons of the eagle is Sagitta. And Sagitta is the arrow or the lightning bolt of Zeus.
Mm.
And so this idea of the battle of the Titans at the winter solstice, because you have Jupiter, who is Zeus, Sagittarius, and you have Kronos, which is Capricorn, Saturn. And so the winter solstice is when they battle. And so that's a really important moment, because it's the battle of time. As you were speaking about the things to do with different time and how do we fit
Mhm.
this in. And so this is where this battle of time is happening. And so Aquila the eagle, well, think about the Roman Empire. What was the highest totem animal of the Roman Empire? Was the golden eagle, right? And so these symbols are all linked into our history, into the patterns that are playing out in our humanity, in our story. And that's where you can go back through time and see, well, which deacon was it ruling that time? And then you'll start to see, wow, they were actually using golden eagles at the very time that this deacon was in that auspicious moment. And so, yeah, I mean, Aquila is, it's one of the stages in a way of the evolutions of Scorpio. We end up as the eagle. And so that's the seventh, no, the sixth line, right? You could say the sixth line in the hexagram is like the eagle. But of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah, it's always you always like describe the six line. Well, you're like a bird flying on top of the mountain, and you have a high view level of everything. Yeah.
yeah. And
Mm.
so that's the sixth initiation of Scorpio, is the eagle.
Mm.
And so that's what I say, like all of these things fit together. And so if you think about what a sixth line is like, it's similar to that. But then there's also this, the lightning bolt of Zeus, which means that instant action, instant destruction, resurrection, creation is happening, because you're aligning, really, if you think about, this is when the Christ light is being born at this time in the zodiac. So this Aquila is like, seeing everything, seeing the broader picture, seeing, like you said, like all the new, Aquarian age versions of all of this. And then when it's time to create or destroy, it just goes all in.
Yeah.
And so, so this is, these are like just some simple ways we can explore, like, what is this deacon's story?
Mm.
How is that applied to our life? And if you know that, right, that you're meant to have that broad view, and sometimes in a sixth line position, you're going to feel, well, why is it not my time yet? Why has it not happened yet? And it's going to be like all waiting, waiting, waiting. But when it lands
Yeah.
in Aquila, it's like everything goes, or a whole new system, a whole new fractal way
Mm.
of being is just going to explode into creation. And so this gives us an idea of how to navigate our life. Well, that's very different to Sagitta, right? Sagitta's job is to destroy, is to
Yeah.
destroy the old. So even though they're similar in a sense in this Capricorn way, we have to have that, the death of the sun at the winter solstice, before then the Christ is born, the resurrection, which
Mm.
is then the Aquila, the eagle. And then when we move on to the last part of Capricorn, it's completely different. This is when we move into the ancient symbol of the sea goat, right? Of like, why is Capricorn this sea goat? Why is it always pictured in this ancient way? Because Delphinus is the last 10 degrees. And what is Delphinus? Well, that is the rebirth, right? That is the new waters that are emerging from to give the new life for the wheel. And then of course that moves into Aquarius, where we have the star codons in the DNA. And so like you can see, like when you know all these things, you can really map out the entire year in a completely new narrative that gives a lot more depth and diversity. So you can apply all of your lines, all of your gates, whether you use sidereal, true sky, whatever it is you want to do. The star law is the star law, and that is really the instruction manual
Mm-hmm.
on how to embody your signs.
Yeah, so it's really like it gives, just like the gene keys first gave us a new layer, it gives us more depth. And now I think with your beautiful descriptions, and it's just like next level. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And what I also love is I love storytelling so
Absolutely.
much. And I mean, this is all storytelling, you know, the stories, like
Yeah.
you said, the stories from the stars. And so if you click on those, is there like a description of those, or
Yeah. So each one you click on, and it will take you to a new thing.
um,
So obviously, opposite the 61 is the 62, which when
mm,
you look at your cross, you're able to see. So when you go through, it's got all of the quadrinity psychology. It's got
mm,
all about the which gates are connected to it, and of course, obviously, the book is the whole depth. So you can look in and you can say, okay, so that's my sun, and then what's the opposite to that? What is the earth? What is my earth gate?
mm-hmm,
And so then you can see which deacon is your earth gate. And again, three different versions of Cancer, right?
mm,
We often think of like, oh, Cancer's the home and Cancer's these things. And so, but we need to go deeper into what is the true essence, because what is Ursa Minor here? Like Ursa Minor is the pole star, right? It's that fixed point in the heavens that we use for navigation. And so this idea of like that you have to have that, follow your sort of North Star, right? Follow the pole star. That's how they navigated on the seas. If you don't have that in your life, then you're just lost at sea, in the emotions, in the waters. And that's what moves you into the flood story. So Noah's Ark, the story of Noah's Ark is Cancer.
mm,
And this aligns perfectly to when the flood would have happened after Egypt. So when you look at the greater wheel of the precession of the equinox, you'll actually see that Argo Navis, which is Noah's Ark, this is where they got it from. This happens at exactly the point of when we come from Leo, move into Cancer.
oh
And this is,
wow,
yeah, so the stories, as I say, the stories in the Bible, the stories of like this great flood and Noah's Ark, and even the dove. So the story of the dove that Noah releases to find dry land, that's another constellation in the stars, the dove constellation, right?
mm,
Columba, where's that found? In Cancer. So it's like the whole narration of everything that we've known, every nursery rhyme that you've heard of, it's all here. So that's the pole star, right? The little bear. That's the star in the tail. And then here we have the Great Bear. Well, the Big Dipper. Everybody sort of seems to know that as one of their main stars. Well, that's the seven rishis in the Vedic system. That was like where the teachings of the Vedas were given to the rishis to then go out into the wild and teach. So although it's about emotions, all of a sudden we've got this moment in our lives of where the divine wisdom was given to people, to humanity, to go out and to carry this off. And that's why we get things like the Vedas, the yoga, the tantras. This all comes from this alignment. And so these are the sort of the nuances of Cancer. It's not so much just about the home and emotions. It's so much more in depth. And even here, the Great Bear, this is actually linked to King Arthur. All right, and so we have the story of do you know Goldilocks and the Three Bears? Have you
no,
heard
I
of that
mean,
story?
no, I mean, King Arthur is familiar, but the story, no.
So there's a story called Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Well, that's in the stars. There are three bears and there's this golden hair, Goldilocks, right?
Mm.
So that's a sort of a child story that kids get taught in the UK, especially. And so this here, the bear is connected to King Arthur. And
Mm.
so that again, you then get taken into the Arthurian myths as to why that was. So when you know this, you start to see what your star signs and what your gates are trying to take you into these mythical stories, these times in our humanity. And so that's why I say, like, that's why the book ended up being like, 600 pages.
Yeah,
Was
wow, yeah. Now I feel ready to dive in because
Yeah.
it is really, really fascinating. Well, thank you so much for, yeah, sharing this. This is really, yeah, so many new different perspectives and everything. And I just, it kind of shows us that, nothing is fixed. The only constant we really have is change. And I think it's so wonderful that we are having the courage, especially you, like to just share this transmission, because we can so easily like, well, no, but this is what it says, this is how it should be, let's not disrupt, because we could be like, oh, now what's going to happen with human design and gene keys, and everything is valid in its own context. It appeared at a time where it was right, and we use it, and then it builds upon each other, and we create something new from it, right? I think it's so, so wonderful. And also with the astrology, even, right? Like, yeah, we have now these 13 signs, but I think there was a reason why humans decided to make these 12 signs, because it gave us something easier to understand, right? Because we have these opposites and how we can balance it and everything. So, and now with that foundation, we're now, okay, now it's going to be more asymmetric, and now we're going to throw some other ones in there. So, yeah, it's really wonderful. So thank you so much for doing this wonderful work. It's, like I said, very advanced and really gets me excited because I get easily bored, to be honest. Even like I remember in school, I was like, really, and when there was something where I actually had to use my mind in kind of a challenged way, I just always loved it. And then when you start to understand and also how things then click and align with what we actually see in nature, I think that's just so, so fascinating and wonderful. It makes you even like, okay, like how this all came about, the world, and it sometimes for my mind, I even remember as a child, sometimes I had this like urge to like, yeah, okay, but how did the world come, and God and universe, and like my mind couldn't comprehend, right? Because it's so darn beautiful and amazing and illogical and magical and like, wow, right? And then all these things, it's just like, oh my God, there's such a divinity behind it and such perfection that really goes beyond our little mind. And I think every single one of us is given certain pieces of the puzzle, which over now thousands of years, right? You now have brought together so many different ancient wisdom or truth, however we like to call it. And now it's like all coming together, right? How beautiful. And everybody plays their very unique role. And I mean, that's really the message in human design. Like everybody is a unique puzzle piece, and we need to work together, not against each other. And, really appreciate our differences and our different roles in this big plan. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
No, absolutely. And just to say, like, I don't know if we have time just to share one more thing, but yeah, like it's in a way, however you want to work with it, right? This is just another offering into the space to
Hmm.
a new way to look at everything.
Yeah.
And um, the latest stuff that I've been doing, that I just wanted to share, is the star codons, which
Hmm.
happened as a second part two of the Lost Octave on the
Hmm.
following Lionsgate the next year. So last year, when that came through, all of a sudden now it was to go and look into the DNA and to really study the DNA and basically decode the hexagrams, the DNA, and to find new things. And
Hmm.
what I did was I actually managed to find and align it into the maternal DNA. So
Um,
what Ra had done is he did linked the amino acids and the nuclear DNA,
mhm.
but what my, because it's all about the Venus transmission, right? So it's all about the divine, trying to bring the divine feminine, weaving it into it. So then my road was, I then decoded the maternal DNA, which for most people they don't even know that they have it. But you have another two strands of DNA. So you have the two strands of DNA, the normal nuclear DNA, and then you
Mhm.
have the maternal DNA, which is another two strands. And so the maternal DNA is the powerhouse of the cell, right? That is what
Oh,
animates.
okay. So we have DNA, and what we have been considering as DNA is the not the maternal. So the maternal is the most powerful in easy term.
Yeah, and it's what brings the animation force to life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how they carbon date things back when they say, oh, it's like 6,000, 7,000 years old. What they do is they don't use the nuclear, they use the maternal, because the
Mm-hmm.
maternal DNA is the same DNA that's in you, was in your mother, your grandmother, your great
Mm-hmm.
grandmother, and it goes all the way back
Yeah,
until your
yeah.
first ancestor.
And this must accelerate healing, right? Through generations back and forth. It's kind of a shortcut, no?
Exactly. And that's what the star codons is, that we trace back to first Eve, which is 300,000 years ago, which they know is scientific. They call it mitochondrial Eve.
Mm-hmm.
And so this mother line is this sort of pure, untouched line. So the nuclear DNA can mutate and change, and it depending on your parents and the grandparents, it's all shifts. The maternal DNA is the same code all the way back to when your first generation
Wow. So
appeared.
it's pure.
Exactly. And so, like you were saying about health, it's normally the mitochondrial DNA that either rejects or protects itself when there's illness. And then that's what they're trying to find, a way to communicate with the maternal DNA to allow it to be healed and changed, because at the moment it will stop like any sort of mutations, and that's why people develop things like cancers. So
Mm.
this connection to the maternal DNA is so important at this time, and it's passed through female to female. So I would have it from my mother, but I can't pass it on. Whereas
Mm.
if you have a daughter, then you can pass it on to her, and then
Mhm.
she would
I
pass it.
do, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, great. So this is how it works. So when I mapped that into the hexagrams, all of a sudden, different things appeared. There were different amino acids, there were different functions, there was a whole new library of how the feminine DNA works in comparison to the nuclear DNA. So one of them, I'll just share
Yeah,
quick.
please. Now, because I didn't get it first what the star codons are, and I know you mentioned it to me before, but thank you for explaining this. And we have a little bit more time. I'm happy to. This is too good to cut it
I know there's
short.
a lot to.
Yeah.
So I made this, and people are more than welcome to, take a picture of this and to use this, right? This was my sort of gift as a New Year's thing. So the Christmas special that I did was about the star codon of the void. And so all of them have got different names. So each of the star codons have got their own names. And so there are 52. I found 52 star codons,
Mm-hmm.
which is different to the amino acid groupings. So hexagram 10, I found in the maternal DNA, actually acted as a stop codon. So at this time of the winter solstice, which is nature, this idea of stopping when the sun is crucified and goes into the tomb for its resurrection, this moment of stopping at the winter solstice perfectly matches the mother DNA within your own body. So
So that we have to rest and go inward and take a break and let it be.
exactly. And so this idea of sort of at the winter solstice, there's this all of this action and all of these things happening. Really, we're going against the natural harmonics within the DNA of the mother, which says, okay, it's winter,
Yeah.
rest, stop,
Mm-hmm.
allow yourself just to be. And so that's hexagram 10, which is a new stop codon that I found.
Mm-hmm.
What was really interesting while I was saying about 61 being special, because 61 was the first of the lost octave in the chromatic scale that I said.
Hmm.
And so, so perfectly, I found that 61 is a start codon. Now, normally in the what's been known so far and in the human design work is that the only start codon was gate 41.
Exactly.
Well, now because I'm bringing the other side of the picture, the feminine aspect to it, the feminine start codon is 61. So now we can see, and I call this the star codon of Eve and the star codon of Adam. So we have the story of Adam and Eve, and then what's right between them but the 60, which is that going back to what we spoke before, this idea of time, the next octave up is at that 60 point.
Mm.
And so now what I found in the genetic code is that these two gates, the 41 and 61, are actually genetic lovers. And so you don't get that in the normal amino acids and the normal groupings, is that they're actually separated, right? They're not connected, or they're in different groups.
Hmm.
Whereas in the maternal DNA, we find these pairings and these lovers. And so 61 and 41 are actually genetic lovers, and they're both start codons. They both code for methionine, which is that start amino acid. So now we can see that like this is like the keepers of the wheel, right? This is what Ra speaks about, the keepers of the wheel. Well, why did he put that in there? He obviously knew there was something here, but it's for now that this time has happened that I now know and can add into the transmission and be like, I know why it's the keepers of the wheel, because it's not just that one start codon. We've now got the feminine aspect to it. And so this is the journey that we're exploring in the star codons course. Is we go through every single gate, we go through all of the code and the differences between the maternal and the nuclear DNA, and there's a transmission for everyone. So we get to read about like what is the star codon of Eve, what it's about, and Adam and the void. And the Christmas special is on the website for free, that anybody wants to tune into what we go into, you can listen to that. There's a meditation at the end that I take people through about the void. And so we can see this idea of the winter solstice, this stopping, this resting, and then we have the maternal stirring, and then we have Adam that starts. And so this is why this time of year is reflected in our DNA, and now we can prove it. Now we can see the association between our bodies and the greater cosmos, and so heaven and earth are becoming really woven as one through all of this information.
Mm. And so is it a little bit like we're here to stop, to slow down, and then first the maternal gets activated? It's like, I think we're more receptive, we're more awake, and then the nuclear, I mean, the start codon, when you say it's more the start codon of Adam, the start masculine, then we're moving more into action.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. And so this is where you can start to see that by the time we get to Imbolc or celebration on the February the 1st, we've activated the feminine, the masculine, we've had that break, and so now it's ready. Right now it's like the earth is, we're moving into that birth of the first seeds and the sprouting and mother nature. And that's why I say like the 72. So you can see here the two different lines is that this inside line is the 64, and this is the difference when you have 72. But what you'll find is that at the moment of Imbolc, they are perfectly aligned. So at the moment of the winter solstice, the gates are aligned, and then right there, they're aligned. So they're slightly different degrees, but they're kind of within the same parameters. And that's what's really beautiful about this. And so 72 times 6 lines gives us 432. And 432 is the natural resonance of Mother Earth. So the
Wow,
64,
okay.
64 times 6 gives us 384. But if we look at 72 times 6, it gives us 432, I say, which is in hertz, in music, is the harmonic of Mother Earth.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a very popular frequency.
Yeah, and so this is where you start to see that these numbers, these gates, the code, the DNA, the star stories, and this is what I'm bringing through to share with people, because I feel that when we can merge the star stories into our physical body and understand that our body, nature, and the stars are all actually reflecting exactly the same story, then we can move in harmony with everything. Then we can start to live in accordance with the earth, and
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
the disease within our own system. That's the path of healing. So yeah, the star codons are super deep, and then the final part of the star codons is once we trace back to first Eve and we do all of the gates, all 72 of them, we then quantum leap, and I've actually managed to mathematically calculate the genetic code into the ninth dimension. And I know this might sound super radical, but all of the geometries from the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, eighth, and ninth,
Mm-hmm.
all of that, I've calculated how the genetic code actually moves into that with the geometry and the mathematics. And then it was about maybe a couple of months after I did that with the star codons and launched the program, one of the geneticists started to speak about and prove that the DNA code is moving into the fourth dimension. So
Mm-hmm.
again, the sort of this idea that as these transmissions are coming through, and as I'm sharing these things, it's almost like very soon afterwards, all of a sudden, science is proving that these things
Yeah.
are found. So it's like this veil of possibilities are opening,
Mm-hmm.
and then I always say it's just a matter of time before they prove these things that I've proposed. And the 72
Mm-hmm.
gates, they've already found that there are actually 68 genetic codes. So science has already moved from 64 to 68.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so,
they're catching up. Yeah.
yeah, so that's why this has been a beautiful, it's like a year long process. We take people through all 52 star codons,
Mm-hmm.
and all the way through. So, yeah, it's a real sort of trace back to Eve and then a quantum leap into Aquarius. So it's just been absolutely fascinating to see
Wow.
the genetic
Now,
code.
one question. So why, so we have the 72 gates, but we only have 52 star codons?
Yeah, so star codons are grouped. So, like the amino acids are grouped. So you have like serine.
Is it kind of like the in the gene keys we have the codon rings?
Yeah, so I think Ra calls them like the Godhead, right?
I think so. Yeah, I mean in the gene keys we have the codon rings where different kind of amino acids they
Yeah.
come
So
together.
yeah, so the Godhead that I know of is like the groupings, right, of like serine,
Mhm.
the amino acid,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
isoleucine.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I say. That's all based on the nuclear DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was my path was to find the maternal and
Yes.
see differences. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the maternal DNA, there's differences that there's not just sort of whatever, I think there's 22, I think, groupings or 21 groupings in the nuclear DNA. In the maternal DNA, there's 52.
Okay, okay, got it now. So it's
If
basically
you,
the maternal codon rings in some way.
um, it aligns both. It
Yeah.
does both. So the whole idea for the star codons is to give us both sides of the story and then to see how they're connected. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
why you end up with some groups have many
Mm-hmm.
gates, some don't have so many, some are sort of like sovereign, and some have gates within gates. And so there's all this geometry that and the easiest way that I've shown it is through the fourth dimension. So the
Mm-hmm.
genetic code actually works seamlessly when you move up a dimension, exactly what I did with the Lost Octave with astrology. So this idea of this multi-dimensional human, it actually becomes much easier to see how we are multi-dimensional when you move up into the next layer. It becomes much easier actually, and I speak about it being, it's more intricate but less complex.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see it, it's so beautiful. When you can see how the code moves together into the ninth dimension, and at the ninth dimension, there is no separation. It's practically impossible to have this sense of separation. Like you can be sovereign fractals, but everything's connected. It can't not be. And so this is where we can now start to prove that all of the gates, that we are all of the gates, we are all of the DNA, we are all of these.
Yes, finally, exactly.
And so, but it takes us a journey, right? We go through one gate at a time, and then
Mhm.
all of a sudden we have our whole profile that we
Mhm.
link with, and then the sidereal, and then the true, and all of a sudden, like you just go, oh, I may as well just learn the whole thing because
Yeah. And
it's
this is so beautiful to kind of bring it all together because this is what brought me so much joy. So when I was studying human design with Karen Parker, and she always said, "You have all of the chart," and it was kind of confusing first, like, "What do you mean?" Because we kind of over-identify. But then I started to learn, like the human design chart, whichever that is that resonates with you. Maybe you transcend it at some point, and the gene keys. I feel it's our access point that starts to activate the first level. And then it goes further and further and further and further, and it keeps activating. And now here we are, like, and never imagined, like, now I'm into like the Lost Octave, and there's actually 72, and now the maternal DNA. And I don't think that I would have been open and receptive to this in my own evolution, even like meeting you, us connecting, if I wouldn't have gone through the very traditional human design path and everything, because there was like, it's like a little staircase you take, right? And there's also no right or wrong where we're at, right? If some people will always be just with the traditional human design or the traditional gene keys, or now this like very expanded new version, and it's all perfect. And Richard Rudd, you probably know this, in the very end of the Pearl sequence, he kind of makes a joke, or he's like, well, the biggest joke of all is like, you have all 64 gene keys, so it's like we can play with all of them. There's not, because this is universal wisdom, and I find through your work it's just so much more refined, and I love that there's math behind. It's just for me like, oh my God, I kind of want to nerd out and like want to understand how you calculate this, because I had a math major in high school, and it was one of my favorite things. My math teacher was like, you're going to be the next math teacher here in the school. And I always wanted to be a teacher, but I just couldn't get around to just doing school math. And that's why I think I love human design, gene keys, and now these new calculations with true sidereal astrology, and studying, okay, how are we going to calculate the year? Like now I'm starting to find my passion for math again. And I mean, what you're sharing is incredibly amazing. I love how humble you are, because this is kind of like incredible work. So
oh,
it's
thank you.
it's incredible. And I love also because we can become very egocentric sometimes, when we're like, I think it's for all of us humans. And I mean, you have this super open, far view, right? Where it's like this flexible way of thinking. And that's how I am. That's the only thing that resonates with me. And that's luckily the people I tend to attract, like you, because it opens up our horizon. It gives us new perspectives. And we are all sovereign in getting to decide, like, what resonates with me, what do I want to work with, what do I want to contemplate. And I definitely feel my next step is diving into your work, because I have been, yeah, contemplating the gene keys for a really long time now, and it has been such a joy. And thank you so much for taking the time to explain the maternal DNA, because I didn't get that part before. I think that's why I was holding on to reading your book, actually, because I wasn't fully ready. And now something clicked there. So thank you so much.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're so welcome. Thanks so much for the kind words. And yeah, I mean, so the book is, so all the maternal work, the DNA work, the star codons was this year's transmission.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part's not in the book because the book was from
Yeah.
23.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you can use the book in multiple ways. So for you, like yeah, all the maths is in there. So I laid out everything. So if you really want to geek
Mm-hmm.
out on numbers,
Mm-hmm.
degrees, and all the bits, it's all in there. And so for other people, they're like, oh, I just want to kind of know the star stories. Like just read the
Mm-hmm.
star stories. Don't
Mm-hmm.
worry about the degrees. because the
Yeah.
stories are sort of like you said, like all children learn best through stories. Like we learn
Mhm.
humanity, and this was us sitting around the campfire, right? Like sharing the stories of the stars. That's how we
Mhm.
did the
Mhm.
verbal traditions of all this star
Mhm.
lore. So whichever way you want to use it, and with the book, it's got an inbuilt oracle deck in it. So all of the deacons are like an oracle deck. So it's 36
Mhm.
deacons.
Mhm.
So another way you can use it if you're very sort of oracular or day to day. And I just say that if you can read a sentence a day, just get used to it, and then all of a sudden you'll
Mhm.
flow into it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you can ask the book, like, what is it I need to know today? Or if you've got a question about a job, or like, I need some guidance from the stars, like what is it that I need to do?
Yeah.
Just hold that prayer, open the book, and then just find the first thing that sticks out to you.
Mhm.
Because when we say that we're all of it, in a way, it's all going to be correct. Like you said, it's all going to be there to guide you. So you can use it
Yeah.
as an oracle, and a lot of people that are
Yeah.
into things like tarot and things like that, like they use it like that, and it's
Yeah.
how profound it's been to find little snippets of
Mhm.
information just to guide you on your day. So
Yeah.
you can use the book like that.
So now I have just a few more questions, if I may. So if people want to do the star codons, then they have to actually take your course, or is there also going to be a book coming out about it?
No, so the star codons, because it's so the maternal DNA, we are going into really deep. I mean, the healing of the mother line.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's really about having a container of people and to guide
Mhm.
people through it, because each
Mhm.
one is its own transmission. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not really something you could just read and be. It's a
Mhm.
journey, it's a process, and that's why it's a whole year's mystery school, really, to do
Wow.
it. And then after that, we're offering people that go through that process. We're going to be having emissary programs where
Mhm.
they can, if they do things like human design readings and astrological readings, then by doing that course, then we can certify and take them through a process of knowing the star law, the DNA, so that when they do readings, they can
Mhm.
start to pull in this into what they're already doing. And so there's this reciprocity that you can, gain back the investment that you've also put into the course. So yeah, so it's a beautiful thing, and we've got this beautiful container of about 50, 60 people going through this, and it's been about 6 weeks, sorry, and it's just been wild and amazing so far. But we're closing the doors at the beginning of February, so there's
Mhm.
still a chance to join if you feel
Yeah, I
called.
make sure I get the podcast out before that. So thank you for sharing that, so people have an opportunity to look into that.
Yeah,
Wonderful. My final question, and I let you go. So I created these coins, which is basically the programming partners, right? But the 64. So I made 32 genius coins. But now I feel obviously called to make more because now we have 72, right? So it would technically be 36.
yeah, exactly.
So the is it that the 71 and the 72 is programming partner, and the 65 and 66 is programming partner? Are they just in consecutive order, or?
Yep. So the
Okay.
65, 66, 67, 68, 69,
Okay.
and 70,
Okay.
71.
All right.
Yeah.
I can, because yeah, I have to adapt too, and now I feel like I need to make a few more coins, four more coins to get the octave into it. So that's what.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's really that it's the invitation into fourth dimensional astrology. And
Yeah.
so that's what I say, like go through it, play with it. You can even read the book. Funnily enough, you can actually read the book back to front. So I designed it in a way that it's a
Mhm.
palindrome. So you can either read it from
Ah,
the beginning.
you know what's funny? I do that a lot. I read a book or a magazine from the back, so
Oh
it's
well, yeah. So you can actually read the book, especially the story of Hercules in Gate 71 Scorpio. It's
hmm.
actually designed in a palindrome, where you can read it from the back of the book to the
Hmm.
beginning. But yeah, perhaps if you're a beginner of all of it, maybe read the first 72 pages, I would say first, and then decide how you want to read the rest of the book. But if
Hmm.
you're sort of if you're used to this sort of stuff, then yeah, just see what calls you, and yeah, have fun with it. That's the whole idea, like this expansiveness to commune back with the stars and know that this is all linked to our genetic code. That was the beautiful second part of this transmission. And got a couple more courses coming out this year, different levels of entry, different sizes of courses as well. And of course, I'm doing the Star Codons course with Bella,
Mm-hmm.
who's my co-host, and she's been into human design for a long time. And that was a really beautiful thing, that when I shared this with her, that she immediately was like, this is the next phase.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and
I can feel it too.
it's
And I
been so
know.
beautiful to
Yeah.
be that sort of ambassador and pioneer of it, into the community, because obviously
Mhm.
it's like, well, where is all this star law coming from? How is it connected to human design? And so it's a really beautiful thing that in that group, and we're doing, continuing doing more courses, is that anybody who's used to like human design, it's like, well, how do I enter this? I don't know, is it the same language? Like Bella's like this beautiful translator of like, oh, this means this in human design, and this is what it means in the body graph. And so we cover sort of all these bases of how to, from what you're used to into a next phase. Like,
Mhm.
that's why we've created these beautiful containers, so that
Mhm.
you're not lost, and you can journey with all these amazing new revelations that are happening, seem to be week by week, that I'm often putting out brand new stuff and sharing.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all this. You definitely have my support. Yeah, I really love this conversation. It was a little bit longer than usual, but I think it was so worth it. And is there one final nugget of wisdom you want to leave the listeners with? I always ask my guests.
Oh man, we covered so much. Other than just to, if you feel that inkling to that, to look into like the sidereal, the true sky. And it can often be where our pillars of structure feel threatened, or does that mean am I a generator now? Or and it's like, it doesn't mean that you're anything. Just if you're curious, follow the curiosity, because there's normally, every time I've followed my curiosity and the braveness to put out this sort of a book and these courses, it's so rewarding, it's so magical. And
Yeah,
so if you have the curiosity, yeah, play with these things. And as we said, know that you're all the science, so you can't make any mistakes, and just enjoy
yeah.
the journey. So
Wonderful. I love it. Thank you so much again, Robert. This was epic. That's all I want
yeah,
to
thank
say.
you so much for having me on. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again.
Yeah, likewise. And you listeners, I know you enjoyed this probably deeply. Thank you for being here as always. Like and subscribe to the podcast so this message can get out more into the world, because I think this is a very profound message today. And I think it can just transform people's life in a very beautiful way. So thank you for being here with us. Thank you again, Robert. And I'm going to be with you all on the next episode. Bye, everyone.